In 2015, Elizabeth Holmes was worth $4.5 billion. She was the youngest self-made female billionaire in the world. Her company, Theranos, was valued at $9 billion. She was hailed as the next Steve Jobs, a revolutionary entrepreneur who would change healthcare forever. But by 2018, it was all gone. Theranos was worth nothing. Elizabeth Holmes was facing criminal charges, and Silicon Valley was left wondering how one of its biggest success stories had become one of its biggest frauds. This is the story of how Elizabeth Holmes fooled some of the smartest people in the world, raised hundreds of millions of dollars, and built a company that was worth absolutely nothing. Welcome to Business Breakdowns, where we analyze history's biggest business disasters and the lessons they teach us. Today, we dive deep into the Theranos scandal. Elizabeth Holmes was born in 1984 in Washington, D.C. Her father was a vice president at Enron, and her mother worked for the Congressional Budget Office. From an early age, Holmes was ambitious and driven. She learned Mandarin in high school and started a business selling C++ compilers to Chinese universities. In 2003, at the age of 19, Holmes dropped out of Stanford University to start Theranos. The company's mission was revolutionary: create a device that could run hundreds of blood tests using just a few drops of blood from a finger prick. The technology was supposed to be groundbreaking. Instead of drawing vials of blood from patients' arms, Theranos claimed it could perform the same tests with just a few drops from a finger. This would make blood testing faster, cheaper, and less painful. Holmes raised her first funding round in 2004, securing $6 million from investors. Over the next decade, she would raise over $700 million. From some of the biggest names in Silicon Valley and beyond. Her investors included Larry Ellison, founder of Oracle, Rupert Murdoch, media mogul, Betsy DeVos, former U.S. Secretary of Education, the Walton family, owners of Walmart, Carlos Slim, Mexican billionaire. But there was one problem. The technology didn't work. Despite the fact that Theranos' technology was fundamentally flawed, Holmes managed to build a company worth $9 billion. Here's how she did it.
What is wrong with modern medicine?
People don't even know that they have a basic human right to be able to get access to information about themselves and their own bodies that can change their lives. Every person should have the ability to get that type of test, because if you understand that early that you're at risk, there's a lot more that you can do about it. And we'd like to see a world in which every person gets access to this type of basic testing, and the types of tests that are done are ones that provide insight into the onset of disease in time to do something about it.
Holmes was a master storyteller. She positioned Theranos as a healthcare revolution that would democratize blood testing. She claimed her device could run over 200 different blood tests from a single drop of blood, making testing accessible to everyone. Holmes modeled herself after Steve Jobs, wearing black turtlenecks and speaking in a deep, measured voice.
Company is only as good as its people, and we've been fortunate to identify really good technology leadership from a number of different disciplines. One of the things that's unique.
She appeared on magazine covers, gave TED Talks, and was featured in countless media profiles. She became a Silicon Valley celebrity. In 2013, Theranos announced a partnership with Walgreens to put its blood testing devices in stores across Arizona. The company also partnered with Safeway, planning to install devices in hundreds of grocery stores. Holmes assembled an impressive board of directors including Henry Kissinger, former U.S. Secretary of State, George Shultz, former U.S. Secretary of State, James Mattis, former U.S. Secretary of Defense, William Perry, former U.S. Secretary of Defense. These high-profile board members gave the company had raised over $700 million and was planning to go public. But behind the scenes, the technology was a complete failure. The beginning of the end came in 2015, when John Carreyrou, a reporter for the Wall Street Journal, started investigating Theranos. Carreyrou received a tip from a former Theranos employee who was concerned about the company's technology. As he dug deeper, he discovered that 1. The technology didn't work. Theranos' blood testing device, called the Edison, could only perform a handful of basic tests, not the hundreds it claimed. Fake demos. When investors and partners visited Theranos, they were shown fake demonstrations using traditional lab equipment, not the company's own technology. 3. False claims. Theranos claimed its tests were as accurate as traditional lab tests, but they were actually much less reliable. And number 4. Regulatory violations. The company was using its devices on real patients without proper FDA approval. In October 2015, the Wall Street Journal published a devastating article exposing Theranos' problems. The article revealed that Theranos was using traditional lab equipment for most of its tests. The company's technology was unreliable and inaccurate. Former employee Theranos was essentially dead. The company had laid off most of its employees, settled with the SEC for $500,000, and Elizabeth Holmes was facing criminal charges. The Theranos scandal teaches us several important lessons about business and investing. Lesson 1. Due diligence matters. Many of Theranos' investors failed to do proper due diligence. They were so impressed by Holmes' vision and charisma that they didn't verify her claims about the technology. Lesson 2. The power of storytelling. Holmes was a master storyteller who could sell a vision even when the reality didn't match. This shows how important it is to look beyond the story and examine the actual product or service. Lesson 3. The dangers of groupthink. Silicon Valley's culture of fake it till you make it, and its obsession with unicorn startups created an environment where Theranos could thrive despite its fundamental flaws. Lesson 4. The importance of skepticism. The media, investors, and board members all failed to ask tough questions. They were too willing to believe in the story without verifying the facts. Lesson 5. Regulatory compliance. Theranos' failure to get proper FDA approval and its violation of the healthcare industry became much more skeptical. Startups faced higher barriers to entry. Regulatory compliance became non-negotiable, and medical device claims were examined with a microscope. Investors became much more cautious. They demanded technical expertise in their due diligence teams. Regulatory compliance became a top priority, and they learned to look beyond charismatic founders. The lesson was clear. Build real products, not just stories. Honesty and transparency became essential, and everyone learned that charisma alone isn't enough to build a lasting business. The Theranos story is a cautionary tale about the dangers of believing in a vision without verifying the reality. It shows how even the most impressive entrepreneurs can fail when they prioritize storytelling over substance. But it also teaches us valuable lessons about business, investing, and the importance of skepticism in an age where anyone can become a billionaire on paper. Thank you for joining me on this analysis of one of Silicon Valley's biggest failures. Next time on Business Breakdowns, we'll explore another corporate disaster and the lessons it teaches us. Until then, remember, in business, as in life, it's always better to verify than to trust.